Oh, yeah. Can everyone hear me? Like, can I just get a confirmation or like the chat or something?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, so I'll share my screen. I hope that's visible as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So welcome guys to the workshop on Indian politics and econ. This I'm sorry for the like slight technical delays on my end. But also, there's a short disclaimer before I start this. Understand that this is purely a factual uh, sort of overlook or a workshop, which is trying to be as neutral as possible. It is quite a like hard thing to do in a polarized world that we live in, and also especially in a topic like politics, which is often quite polarized and has quite different views. I'll try to, I, to the best of my abilities, give the most neutral perspective of all those views. But I'm also human, so I'm open to human error and human biases. So at any point, if like if you feel that there's something that's uh, wrong that I'm saying or something that's probably a little biased that I'm saying, so you are very, very free to like text on the chat or something. Also this like workshop is divided into three different parts. So after every part, I'll be taking like a short 10 to 15-second gap, so in which you can ask your questions. And otherwise, if you have any questions specifically, you can always like keep typing in the chat. I will see them at like these windows of opportunities whenever I do. So without any further delay, we can start with the workshop. So the historical context of Indian politics is probably quite important to understand, which I think people often miss out. I think the first thing to understand is the post-independence INC or the Indian National Congress, which happens. Uh, in this, understand the Indian National Congress was quite a group of individuals, freedom fighters who were fighting for independence for our country. This group was obviously quite representative initially, at least, of the Indian interest of the larger like national interest as it is. Once again, I'm getting something in the chat. I'm not able to access the chat for some reason. Uh, I'll just keep the chat open.
Vinam, these people
Yeah,
are
yeah.
just typing their names for
Okay, the names.
attendance.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, that's all right. All right, cool. So, basically the International Congress was quite representative initially of individuals from different sects. So it had B.R. Ambedkar, Sarojini Naidu, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who's also called Frontier Gandhi, and Abul Kalam Azad. Something note about Kalam Azad is also that they were the individual who was quite important in bringing the Muslim representation within the INC. So when you had the Shimla conference, which became quite important to understand like the pre-partition era, which was basically a conference between the Indian leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and the Congress, the INC basically, and the Muslim League, which existed, right? And obviously moderating that was the British. This happened in 1945. So that time, like uh, Azad was probably quite important to understand as a leader who was representative of the Muslim League of India itself. Something that happens post independence INC is also important to understand. This can probably come up in debates where you are trying to like defend dominant parties in developing on or in countries which are emerging democracies. This can also come up in specifically the Indian context, where you have debates about whether like you regret the INC coming into power and holding the power for decades on end. So a couple of pointers in that would probably be the positives of INC would be it was a fairly like a party which is always open to representing the larger majority of India. Obviously, it had its differences, and obviously, in a country as diverse as India, it had its differences, but it still was able to gain the larger majority of the Indian diaspora. Also, to note is that it was a fairly secular party. It did not have like it did not like appeals to any certain religious body initially, and also it was open to change. Even though when we see like Nehruvian socialism as the like starting point of the INC or the starting point of our independent or of independent India itself, which was a model based on the USR model, which was quite successful at that time, where Nehru had adopted a lot of things from the industrial like revolution of USSR and the like large scale public welfare policies of the Russian like Federation. That was something included within our model of like economy itself. But and initially it was quite good, right? Because it ensured that large scale industrial development could happen in India, and also ensured that individuals were reaping the benefits of this industrial growth. But in the longer run, there were problems to this itself, particularly the license Raj system, which I'll come to just in a short bit. Before that, like we'll navigate through a bit of the history of the INC itself. So the second thing is the Indira Gandhi era and the emergency that happened. So some of you might know, some of you might not know. This was quite an important part of Indian history because this was probably the like till today is probably the biggest attack on Indian democracy itself. When we say that we were a democratic country, where we say that we upheld like liberty and freedom of individuals, this was probably the one time during our history that it was like quite like you could say that it was literally an attack on the democracy or what India stood for in terms of its principles. So Indira Gandhi, under the pretense of catering towards the poor and catering towards like the like welfare centric policies of hers, and also under the pretense of the Bangladesh war, was did like a lot of things uh, which could be considered antithetical to democracy itself. Some of those things were probably like censoring the free press and media. It also banned political organizations, or a large chunk of political organizations were banned. It also underwent an operation called Operation Blue Star, which particularly targeted the Sikh, what do you say, minority in India. This was also the time where the Blue Star operation was the attack basically in the Golden Temple, which is like looked at in a very very negative light for obvious reasons. Uh, for all those reasons, understand that this was in essentially quite a big attack on the democracy, to the extent where it led to the fracturing of the INC itself, or the International Congress, which was quite like successful in being held together up until this point. It was fractured, right? And what happened post emergency was the Janta Party came up in the account. Janta Party was a party which was actively anti to whatever the Indira Gandhi Congress was. So there was a split from the Congress, which was basically a INC which was pro Congress, and a INC which was anti Indira Gandhi. So, and a pro Indira Gandhi and anti Indira Gandhi Congress was formed. Within the anti Indira Gandhi Congress, they also formed parties like the Janta Party, like I said, and which became a major like social like a party for social change, and like basically standing up to the emergency and holding Indira Gandhi accountable at that point of time. So the leader was Muraji Desai at that point in time. Also, something to note at that time was the uh, the sort of catering towards like casteist based policies, right? So at the first time before this, and there's like a small segue that I'll do into caste politics of India, because I think that's a huge another topic. But something to note probably is that before Janta parties coming into power, it was only that B.R. Ambedkar was able to institutionalize some of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes within within the like system, and to give some quotas or reservations to them. This was also something that was derived by B.R. Ambedkar from their like previous like the British colonial era rulers also, where like the British also had certain uh, reservations or certain differences where they were giving to this like scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. All this was quite poorly organized and managed by them. Ambedkar was able to institutionalize them and give quotas and definitive quotas within all states, and made a national policy on this, right? So, and it basically institutionalizes in within the constitution itself. So that's quite important. But after Ambedkar, we did not see much in terms of like the upliftment of lower caste, both in terms of the socially lower caste and also economically lower caste. So Mandal Commission was the commission under Muraji Desai, uh, which basically went under like a survey of India and tried to understand where does this like where does this discrimination, or where which is the like try to pinpoint as to where they can help out in terms of social welfare policies. So obviously one was the social aspect of those policies, that these individuals were socially isolated from the larger masses or from the upper caste itself. The other, or in line with that, was educational policies which the Mandal Commission went under, and the result of both social and lack of education of these low castes was linked then to their like being like economically poor itself, right? So basically, that 11 factors in which they like did so. You can study more about it. I put up links in the end, but understand that the Mandal Commission was the first commission which is able to uh, give some sort of what do you say, institutionalized or give some sort of representation towards low caste at that point of time. Uh, However, this was quite short-lived because after the Janata Party came into power once, they never did again, right? Congress came into power again, Rajiv Gandhi came into power again after Indira Gandhi's assassination, after which it was scrapped for almost a decade. And only when VP Singh came into power was this again enacted. So implementation was done again by VP Singh in the 90s, right? Except like VP Singh's era was also quite short-lived. Also, when VP Singh did bring it up into like implementation, there was a lot of backlash, especially from North Indian states, because that was still where a lot of upper caste domination existed. So there was a lot of protests and a lot of like this was taken up to the Supreme Court whether these quotas were constitutionally valid or not. In the southern of India, at that point of time, there were already reservations given by state parties itself or like the states individually themselves. So there was not much of a backlash. There was some amount, obviously, of backlash, but to a large extent, it was majorly North Indian states at that point which protested against that. But the Supreme Court held two things, right? One was the fact that 50%, like the reservation should not be more than 50% of the population of India, and the other was that the reservation needs to be done on the basis of like social and like on the basis of what do you say, educational, and then on the basis of economic. So it upheld the Mandal Commission's findings at that point of time. Uh, Another thing that happened under Narasimha Rao in '93, basically the Mandal Commission was implemented under Narasimha Rao at that point in time. And the other thing that happened under his era was the liberalization of the economy. So up until this point, and majorly by the 50s, 60s, and 70s, basically when India got independence, we were following the Nehruvian socialism model, right? Which basically meant large scale industrial growth and a lot of welfare towards the poor and like upliftment of them. Uh, but the problem happened where you had a lot of control of the government, where the government had a lot of intervention as to who would be getting licenses or who would be getting the permits to conduct business in the first place. It's also called the license Raj system. Uh, so that often led to businesses not coming into India or individually, like even foreign businesses not investing in India, but also businesses which existed in India not being very, very successful because it was quite open to government contract and government like what do you say, government giving these permits to these companies, right? And obviously led to a lot of mass corruption at that point of time. It was also called the crony socialism model. uh, so that was changed, and that was one factor probably. The other factor was in the 90s, globalization happened all around the world, and a lot of countries did reap the benefits of this globalization. Surely one could say that it might have been after the fall of the Soviet era and like the rise of like capitalism in the United States and the success stories of that make creating this narrative that globalization was particularly good. And people could also say that before this permit Raj would have been beneficial in terms of protecting the indigenous businesses of India, which is also to a fair extent true. But to a large extent, we see majority of the economists believing that growth to India needed liberalization at that point in time because we had been living the Soviet model for far too long, in the Nehruvian socialism model for far too long. Also, like something interesting to note in the Nehruvian socialism model is that even though it was quite socialistic at that point in time, it was like Nehru's this model or economic model was still quite hated by the leftist or the like the modern day you would call them communist, but by the left which existed in India, the large scale labor unions existed in India at that point in time, they still did not appreciate of or did not think that it was like far enough on the left what Nehru's policies were, and that's why they also were quite anti-Nehru at that point in time. At the same time, people on the right were also quite Nehru because they also felt that his policies weren't like quite open to free market. but Nehruvian socialism was still something that we followed for almost more than a decade. Something to note in Mandal Commission also is probably the fact that sure we did give out welfare, but that welfare within the intersection of religion was also quite disproportionate, simply because of lack of data on minority communities, on like on Muslim, on Sikh, or on Buddhist minorities and their social classes existing. uh, because of lack of data there, we did not have enough data to accompany within the Mandal Commission, although Mandal Commission did make some references as to how you would give social welfare to other religious groups apart from Hindu groups as well. This is not quite as nuanced as the Hindu interpretation probably was. Uh, so yeah, in terms of liberalization of the economy, largely most economists do believe that it was probably good that this liberalization happened and probably was quite necessary as well. Uh, Important to note is probably the method of liberalization that we took up, right? So there's a difference in the market of how China has a free market and how India has a free market, because both of these were like socialist to a quite a large extent and quite a planned economy to an extent, and they also changed their free market models during similar decades of the 90s, right? So the Chinese model was somewhere a lot more based on export. That means they benefited always from large scale industrialization in their own country, but then exporting these goods. Although India also had a fair amount of export like duty that we had, but we still were largely a consumer based economy. That means we weren't dependent on other countries buying our goods and services, but rather our own consumers buying our goods and services. It's surely a more stable form of economy, but also something that's less likely to grow as exponentially as Chinese economy did when they implement the free market model. Right, there are very obvious reasons for that because they could largely export cheaper goods and services at that point in time to like the West itself. Uh, Largely in the historical context of Congress versus the BJP economy, understand here to note that there's not much like significant difference between the economic policies of the Congress or the BJP. It's largely been the same, and there are many reasons for that. The only thing to note probably is that uh, oh, uh, someone says that, oh, Zoom says that this meeting will end in 10 minutes. So you'll have to start up another link.
Yeah, we will continue with this link only. A new meeting will be generated. Till then, you can go on.
Okay, cool. Uh, awesome. So just on the last of Congress versus the BJP economy, uh, understand that there was not much significant difference. The only difference probably was the pro-liberalization of the economy, which was uh, which was fairly socialist and fairly like labor forces driven. After that, after the liberalization of the economy, the Congress and BJP economic policies have been fairly the same. Uh, but it's important to note that the perception that BJP is able to gather at this point is that BJP is always more implementing of what do you say, of free market policies or of policies which are like beneficial to largely like larger businesses to grow, even if like there is reason to believe that's not particular case and it's not of significant difference. It's important to note that the perception of individuals on ground is that the BJP is like pro free market and the Congress is still somewhere socialist in its outlook, right? um I will probably like look for questions at this point of time if there are any. Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay, so I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay. Yeah. So just a last pointer actually to the liberalization in the economy is that even though it might have been quite beneficial, uh, there were individuals which are still quite left out in the implementation of this liberalization. So the specific instance would probably be farmers in India, and India was still quite a agrarian economy at that point of time, right? Uh, at that point in time, understand even though liberalization might have been good in terms of providing them like seeds or fertilizer or pesticides from the global market as opposed to the Indian market. So opening it more free to business, even in within the Indian market itself, making it more free to business so comparative prices can drive down the price itself. Understand the problem was that in India, the agrarian society was largely owned still by like large landowners or zamindars like we call it, right? So which meant that labor exploitation existed irrespective of liberalization of the economy. Rather, some people say that it got quite worse because liberalization of the economy also led to something called corporate farming, in which basically large corporates buy up your farms. These could be Indian or like foreign corporates, but basically which led to very or minimal wage literally being paid, or really bad conditions for farmers or like the individuals who were working in those farms itself. So and a good instance to note of that was probably in 2018, the large scale farmer protests which were happening in the like in Delhi itself. It was also happening nationwide. This got quite limited media attention because farmers weren't really seen as a important enough like stakeholder in the Indian like politics. But these protests were very large scale. In fact, they were like farmers from southern states itself who had come to Delhi all the way to protest against this. Probably the only spectacle of that we got were farmer suicides in the state of Maharashtra, which were quite a problem as well. But understand there was a lot more than the farmer suicide at that point in time. It was also individuals on ground who were hurt by this liberalization of the economy and weren't the one who were the benefactors at that point. Right. So second aspect is probably the rise of the BJP, and there's also important context to understand than just like the current whatever we know about of the BJP itself, of BJP passing its policies or making sure its mandate is very strong in the after the recent elections. There's quite a lot of context. So I'll just get into it super quick. Um, so the probably the first thing to note is that most of the parties which came up like holding the like Congress accountable was a Janata Party which came up during the emergency, right? And Moraji Desai also like was one of the people who obviously were the front runners, but a lot of parties which based their ideology on caste based politics also came up from the Janata Party ever coming up, right? One thing to note is where the BJP gets its narrative from, or how is it able to like gather the larger narrative of the Indian mass, right? The first thing to note is during like this is obviously before in like during Indira Gandhi, during Nehru's era as well, where Savarkar and all had their country economic and country social welfare policies. But the first thing where the BJP was able to garner the appease or garner the like garnered the larger masses was probably when the alleged appeasement happened during the Rajiv Gandhi term. So this happened in a Shah Bano case. I won't get into specifics of the case, but basically Rajiv Gandhi intervened somewhere in the Supreme Court decision and was able to like safeguard the minority Muslim voters, right? But it was also seen as something that's antithetical to democracy or something in terms of appeasement that you did towards the Muslim minority that the Congress was often alleged of doing before this also, even during Indira Gandhi's era, they were like alleged of doing this even when Gandhi, like even like literally when Mahatma Gandhi freed this country or whatever, he was still like killed by a extremist, right? So understand that this was often a tool which they were using in terms of alleging that the INC was often pro-Muslim, but this was the first instance where they were able to also convince that of the larger masses that this appeasement happened. The second thing note was probably L.K. Advani and the Rath Yatra that he did. This is the time where basically L.K. Advani is able to mobilize the masses of India and is able to basically march towards what we know of Ayodhya today, of the Babri Masjid issue, and was then like going to demolish the Babri Masjid issue. So that was the end goal of this Rath Yatra. But it's important to note that it's the large scale mobilization that happened witness Rath Yatra of the Hindu majority, and also a lot of a lot of Hindu biased narratives which started percolating within masses, and also mobilization which necessitated to a lot of collectivization of these Hindu majority. This is the first point again where we see that. Then comes probably the Atal Bihari Vajpayee, or like we call Vajpayee's era. Uh, this was quite fractured initially during the 1996 to 98 that he had his term, but his 99 to 2000 whatever term was quite strong. Understand Vajpayee at that point was seen as a leader and probably was quite beneficial to the BJP in terms of the face of the BJP, right? Because individuals like LK Advani or other leaders of the BJP at that point of time were seen as something as quite extremist, right? Vajpayee was rather seen as a more moderate leader, right, compared to these extremist leaders which happened. And that's why Vajpayee was able to be the face of the BJP and was able to like convince the larger masses of like voting for him. And also, like you could say that had fairly good policies also. But again, this came up in the post liberalization of the economy. So at that point in time, both the Narasimha Rao and like Manmohan Singh under him as finance minister, and both the Vajpayee era were still fairly open to free market policies or FDI policies itself, uh, and were like basically pro business itself in terms of economic standpoints. But we were still quite like, if you compare it to the West or if you compare it to China, we were still quite stringent on certain things like FDI, or like in terms of like relatively to the West, but compared to like the 90s of India before like this sort of liberalization, we had opened up the markets quite a bit. So Vajpayee also did represent a quite moderate face of the BJP or the like RSS as it is. I'll just end the meeting and I'll rejoin and then we can continue with the next thing.